The village of Dalton is more than $3.5 million in the hole. Mayor Tiffany Henyard is accused of misusing money, and today she's nowhere to be found.
Very, very diligently, very hard under difficult circumstances to get as much information as we could to share with you.
She thinks she's going to jail. I'm also a former Cook County Sheriff for the Department of Correction, and I suggest that she go and take a tour of that facility.
Corruption in positions of authority is hardly a new phenomenon, but Mayor Tiffany Henyard has seemingly taken it to a whole new level. Now that the media and law enforcement are actively investigating her, she is beginning to face the consequences of her long history of avoiding accountability. Over the years, Henyard employed every tactic possible to stay one step ahead, but now the walls are closing in and nothing appears to be working in her favor. Tiffany Henyard's rise to power began when the Board of Trustees appointed her to serve out the remaining term of the late Mayor Frank Zuccarelli. According to state election law, the Thornton Township Board had 60 days to choose a successor to Zuccarelli, and several candidates were in the running. Joyce Washington, a trustee with a long tenure and status as an interim supervisor, along with Jerry Jones, a trustee and Dorton Township assessor, were considered the front-runners. However, as is often the case in politics, things didn't go as planned. Despite Washington and Jones being the leading candidates, the Board of Trustees was unable to come to an agreement on a single person to fill the position. The process dragged on, and the deadline was fast approaching. Christopher Gonzalez, a trustee, submitted the move to nominate Henyard, and the vote passed, culminating in Henyard being sworn in as mayor shortly before midnight. It's worth noting that Henyard was omitted from the original round of candidates, which should have raised concerns. Trustees, including Gonzalez, had initially been focused on other candidates, but as time ran out, Gonzalez made a hasty decision, hoping that Hen's nomination would unite the board and avoid leaving the decision in the hands of the public. With the clock ticking down to a midnight deadline, Gonzalez took a risk, and his last-ditch nomination ultimately brought Henyard into the mayor's office. When Henyard took on the role, her first public appearance seemed promising. She addressed, "I vowed to the inhabitants of Thornton Township, elected leaders, the Board of Trustees, and the whole staff that we would work hard and have an honest and responsible budget year," she said in her address. "I am a public servant, and I will always put people first for a little period of time." Everything appeared to be going smoothly. Henyard's leadership appeared competent, and her rhetoric was focused on transparency and service. However, the situation quickly took a turn when rumors began circulating that Henyard held a personal grudge against some of the individuals close to the late Mayor Zuccarelli, particularly those who had helped him in his role. The accusations pointed to Henyard feeling intimidated by those with long-standing connections to the position, and in Hen's first action as mayor was to terminate important staff, including Jessica Jones, in a swift and surprising maneuver. The decision was done without explanation and took many by surprise. The vote to remove Jones was swift and unanimous, with even those who had initially supported her now back in the dismissal. The very same day, Henyard made another bold move. She fired Stephanie Weidman again. The decision was made without clear reasoning, and the Board of Trustees was left largely in the dark. Jerry Jones once again made the motion to terminate Weidman, and Joyce Washington seconded it. However, this time, the vote was much more dividing, with a 4-1 split, leaving why were 2 veteran workers dismissed without warning. Even the employees were unaware of what had transpired. One of the workers, stunned by the decision, wrote a text message to Jerry Jones, expressing amazement. "I'm so sorry they let you go. It came out of left field," the message read. "It hurts. I haven't been informed why I've contacted out and am waiting for a meeting to find out what went wrong. Despite the shock and astonishment, no one, even the Board of Trustees, appeared to seek an explanation from Henyard." The episode exposed the first flaws in her leadership. Her actions looked to be motivated by personal fears rather than a true dedication to the residents of Thornton Township. Henyard's appointment was not based on her skills or expertise, but rather owing to the Board of Trustees' political maneuvering and attempts to avoid a public vote. It rapidly became clear that Han's leadership style was more autocratic than collaborative in many aspects. The fallout from these terminations was only the beginning of the deeper troubles troubling the Henyard administration. The Board of Trustees, who had planned to rapidly address the leadership vacuum, suddenly found themselves dealing with a mayor who was unpredictable and, in some instances, overtly antagonistic to individuals who had previously held positions of authority. The public's faith in her leadership was quickly waning, and many residents began to question whether she truly had the best interests of the township at heart. Despite her public pledges to serve the people and maintain fiscal responsibility, her actions spoke louder than her words. By alienating key figures within the township and removing experienced staff members without clear justification, she was setting herself up for further controversy. Her rise to power was swift, but the consequences of her decisions were beginning to catch up with her. As the investigation into her behavior and decisions continues, it remains to be seen how long she can maintain her position. The walls may be closing in on Mayor Tiffany Henyard, and the political fallout from her actions is likely to shape the future of Thornton Township for years to come.
Have confidential, sensitive papers that were in a common area.
This morning, some of those documents were gone.
Tiffany Henyard's recent acts have produced a surge of criticism and intensive scrutiny, and her efforts to explain herself only raise more concerns. Tiffany claimed in a statement that the recent office BAS rearrangements were necessary due to heat issues affecting her ability to work efficiently. She dismissed objections from Assessor Elston as an overreaction to trivial matters, implying that the relocation of the assessor's office was part of a larger initiative to prioritize citizen services. Skeptics quickly pointed out the glaring absence of any official announcement or paper trail supporting such a move. Even some of her followers are beginning to waver, with residents of the township coming out to condemn her policies. One member, who spoke at length in favor of Henyard, said Tiffany had never consulted them on any key issues. This ambiguous defense rapidly altered focus away from the controversy at hand, as one ally suggested that local media should stop focusing on critical investigations and instead highlight positive achievements, such as Thornton Township's receipt of the government finance officers Association's Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. However, this attempt to pivot from scrutiny to praise felt hollow to many residents, as the claims of success could not mask the growing discontent surrounding Tiffany's responses to criticism began to take on a more unusual tone, often laced with spiritual overtones and defensive posturing. Rumors about her perceived incompetence spread widely, exacerbating the tense atmosphere surrounding her administration. Instead of directly addressing the criticisms, her ally Keith Freeman took a more unconventional approach and started openly slamming the media for not presenting Tiffany in a good manner. Freeman attacked the local media, accusing them of concentrating over negative news about the township and disregarding its claimed triumphs. His tone was condescending as he declared that the residents of Thornton Township would benefit more from hearing about the township's accomplishments rather than petty gossip about his leadership. He dismissed critical reporting as kid stuff and challenged people to verify his numbers, asserting that the township's financial reporting would prove the administration's competence. Freeman's words echoed a rising defensiveness among Henyard's staff. They progressively characterized her struggles as part of a divine purpose, placing her as a virtuous person bearing affliction with courage. Freeman even went so far as to remark that God doesn't make errors. He placed the appropriate person here who knew would perform the task, take the lashes, and have the fortitude to withstand them. All of this rhetoric depicted Tiffany's stance as one of heroic perseverance against unjustified accusations, but many locals perceived it as an effort to divert attention from the rising worries about her leadership as public pressure rose. Tiffany used a different approach to control her image. Tiffany began hosting private meetings and limiting media access. When reporters were eventually allowed into some of these meetings, they quickly noticed a troubling pattern. Tiffany would abruptly end the sessions as soon as the media arrived, giving the impression that she was intentionally avoiding accountability. This move only fueled further speculation about her leadership style and whether she was actively hiding from public scrutiny. Meanwhile, tensions within the Freeman doubled back on his allegations, insisting that there was no wrongdoing and blaming the media for concentrating on the mess and gossip rather than more real issues. He also claimed that opponents of Tiffany's leadership were ignorant or intentionally undermining the government without any grounds to alleviate such worries. Freeman offered photo documentation upon request to verify that no files or sensitive materials were mishandled during the office reshuffle, but these offers did little to address the core complaints of residents and critics. many of whom felt Tiffany's administration was more focused on optics than actual governance. Tiffany's response to public disapproval took perhaps the most dramatic turn when she pivoted to spirituality, positioning herself as a virtuous figure engaged in a spiritual battle. She began framing her troubles as a fight against unseen adversaries, suggesting that she was a beacon of good working to fend off evil forces attempting to tarnish her reputation. Tiffany's messaging became increasingly spiritual, with subtle but persistent suggestions from her team that her struggles were not merely political, but personal, portraying her critics as part of a larger scheme to dismantle the positive work she claimed to be doing for the community. Residents and reporters alike began to notice that Tiffany's rhetoric was increasingly lack with religious language. She portrayed herself as someone enduring hardship with grace patience. Others saw it as a transparent attempt to deflect attention from the real issues facing her administration. The shift in tone seemed less about addressing governance challenges and more about redirecting public perception, creating an image of Tiffany as a martyr fighting against unfair criticism. Despite these efforts, Tiffany's reputation continued to decline. Her administration became increasingly characterized by secrecy, deflection, and chaotic decision-making. Critics accused her of failing to respond coherently to legitimate concerns about mismanagement and corruption. One of the key examples was her decision to relocate office spaces, which she claimed was part of a broader initiative to improve citizen services, but the lack of transparency and proper procedure surrounding the move only deepened suspicions that the decision was made for reasons that had little to do with efficiency and much more to do with optics or internal power struggles. As Tiffany's leadership faltered, public trust in her administration eroded. The limited engagement with the community, combined with her abrupt dismissal of valid concerns, only fueled rumors about her unsuitability for office. The lack of accountability and clear communication painted a picture of a leader struggling to maintain her grip on power despite her attempts to reframe the narrative via spiritual excuses, secret gatherings, and hollow defenses. Tiffany's credibility continues to deteriorate. Her administration seemed more intent on controlling its narrative than on tackling the actual concerns at hand. The residents of Thornton Township were left to manage their rising difficulties without any guidance from their leader. Tiffany's relying on spiritual jargon, defensive posturing, and clandestine methods further deepens the schism between her administration and the residents she was intended to serve. Tiffany Henyard's effort to reframe her leadership issues as a spiritual test only helped to cement her adversaries' allegations that her administration had failed rather than tackling her challenges. Head-on with transparency and decisive action, she chose to focus on deflecting blame, limiting public access, and maintaining control of a narrative as her influence continued to grow, leaving the people of Thornton Township to contend with a leader who appeared more interested in protecting her image than addressing the issues facing the community.
Old-faced example of Supervisor Henyard's promise of come to the good things, there's so much good going on that we want to tell you about. When we show up to report on it, we were denied access.
So that's what happened to our reporter, and then at the next meeting that you attended, we heard.
Tiffany Henyard's term as mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thornton Township has swiftly been the focus of a succession of legal and political crises, each more destructive than the last, from her contentious leadership style to allegations of financial malfeasance. Her administration has been marred by multiple legal battles, growing public dissatisfaction, and an increasing number of allegations that paint her as an ineffective and self-serving leader. The drama surrounding Tiffany reached a new height as insiders and residents alike began to speak out about her questionable actions and decisions. Tensions within Henyard's leadership became evident early on, beginning with the restrained relationship with the Dalton trustees. Gonzalez, who had initially nominated Tiffany, was one of the first to publicly express his disappointment. He claimed that from the very first day Tiffany started her term, she acted as though she was a authority in the room. She just kept yelling, "What are they going to think now? What are they going to say now?" Gonzalez remembered referring her encounters with the Dalton trustees. The apparent rift between Henyard and her colleagues only worsened as the year went on, with many of them growing more disillusioned with her leadership style. Tiffany's first year as mayor was marked by multiple controversies, some of which seemed to only grow more problematic over time. The hiring of an inspector who was not properly vetted, the alleged misuse of taxpayer funds without the necessary board approvals, and the use of Dalton police officers for personal security were just a few of the issues that were raised during her initial time in office. As the situation escalated, some officials claimed that Tiffany, the Dalton community, was forced to face the reality that it was paying the price for what they believed was a failure of leadership. The drama came to a head during the annual meeting, when a 23-year-old South Holland resident stepped forward and made a bold call for civic engagement. She urged township leaders to take good faith actions, including making information readily available to the public. You claimed that you want us to participate in civic affairs and that we should attend these meetings. But based on my first meeting in Thornton Township, it appears that some actions are being taken against the interest of the township's residents, she said, putting Tiffany in her administration on the spot. Another resident, G.S. Watts, voiced his concerns regarding Tiffany's handling of the voters' decision to reject a mental health referendum that would have raised taxes in Thornton Township. He said, "This is not an attack on you as a Black woman. I've always been held accountable for my performance and results, and I expect the same from you. We are not brainwashed, we're tired." This confrontation was just the beginning of what would become a series of public grievances. That Tiffany would struggle to handle. Another resident, Trina Diaz, who was once a supporter of Tiffany, came up with a lengthy number of complaints. Diaz came up against what she viewed as mismanagement, citing concerns such as being prohibited from attending a Dalton board meeting and claims of impropriety on official trips. She also pointed to Dalton trustee Andrew Holmes, stating he had been involved in some of the dubious behaviors. Nate Fields, a photographer from South Holland who worked with Thornton Township, also came forward with his own complaints. He recounted a conversation he had with Tiffany after the death of Frank Zucchi, where she had promised him support ever since. He claimed that Tiffany had later fired him without explanation, asking, "Why did you fire me when all I wanted to do was work for my community?" The Fields story became part of a growing list of accusations against Tiffany, with one township staffer even alleging that the mayor had been using intimidation tactics to silence workers. According to the staffer, Tiffany had reportedly been using other men to intimidate employees into keeping quiet, adding to the sense of unease and fear within the township office. With reports of workers feeling harassed and scared, it was clear that Tiffany's leadership had become. Tiffany faced an SA lawsuit brought by a Dalton police officer who had been on her security detail. Tiffany and Dalton Village trustee Andrew Holmes were identified as defendants in the action. Additional legal issues arose from a lawsuit filed by Dwayne Thrash, a former maintenance manager at Dalton. Thrash alleges that Tiffany's would shut in 2023. Ally contacted him with a strategy to replace the school board's counsel with a legal firm selected by the mayor's inner circle. When Thrash declined to engage in what he deemed a nefarious plan, he claimed that he was suddenly dismissed while on an allowed vacation. The complaint accused Tiffany of breaching Thrash's constitutional rights and claimed compensation for his wrongful firing. These claims were merely the tip of the iceberg in terms of Tiffany Henyard's legal troubles. Tiffany was under investigation for using government money to pay for extravagant personal costs, such as pricey dinners and frequent hotel stays. One of the most worrisome elements of these claims was the assertion that Tiffany spent over $900,000 in tax funds on travel over a 2-year period, including first-class flying and luxury hotel stays at locations like the Four Seasons in Atlanta and the Marquis in New York City. Tiffany also raised concerns about her travel to Las Vegas, where she reportedly accrued extra improper spending. Former Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot was recruited to help in the probe into Tiffany's behavior, which increased federal attention. Lightfoot, a former federal prosecutor, was called in to find the truth about Tiffany's alleged abuse of public monies as part of her inquiry. Lightfoot was anticipated to investigate Tiffany's trip to Las Vegas and other suspicious expenses. There were also reports that Tiffany had sought to establish a federal probe into her activities, purportedly threatening reprisal if any steps were taken simultaneously. Lightfoot's inquiry revealed worrisome financial practices involving Tiffany's inner circle, including her boyfriend and significant political friends. Subpoenas were issued requesting documents pertaining to payroll costs. Tiffany's deputy police chief and several of her close associates in the township were among the individuals named in the subpoenas. Keith Freeman, her top aide, also faced legal challenges as he was charged with bankruptcy fraud for allegedly failing to disclose his earnings from Dalton Freeman's actions. In connection to his work with the Village of Robbins, where audits revealed that he had received payments exceeding budgeted amounts, while Tiffany denied any wrongdoing, claiming that the accusations against her were politically motivated and Racially charged her defense only seemed to fuel the growing skepticism she publicly accused her critics, including several Dalton trustees who were also Black, of betraying their community by opposing her. "You should all feel ashamed, Tiffany," attempted to depict the response against her as divisive and unwarranted. But the increasing evidence against Tiffany was difficult to ignore. Investigations found that Tiffany had accrued more than $112,000 in taxpayer-funded travel expenditures within the last year alone. WGN News reported that credit card data revealed a pattern of excessive spending, including luxury hotels and flights. These revelations caused public uproar, with many community members wondering how Tiffany could explain such expenditure when the township struggled with critical challenges amid the escalating crisis. Federal officials continued to probe Tiffany's activities, with some anticipating that the inquiry may lead to even more devastating revelations. The fact that Tiffany's closest allies, including Freeman, were facing their own legal troubles only added to the feeling that the entire administration was mired in corruption for Tiffany Henyard. The weight of these allegations and the ongoing legal challenges seemed to threaten her political future, despite her continued denials and efforts to frame the accusations as racially motivated attacks. The gathering evidence against her made it more impossible for her to keep her position, and many in Dalton and Dorton Township felt it was time for her to be held responsible for her conduct. The confluence of legal dramas, Tiffany's financial malfeasance, and political mistakes portrayed a gloomy image of her leadership, leaving many locals wondering whether her days in power were numbered in the end. Tiffany Henyard's tenure as mayor and supervisor. As the legal battles and federal investigations continue to unfold, it remains to be seen whether she will be held accountable for her actions or whether her efforts to deflect blame and maintain control over her narrative will allow her to weather the storm. Tiffany's time has undoubtedly made a lasting impression on Dalton and Dorton Township, and the effects of her actions are likely to be felt for many years to come.